is the way. This is the way.
Boy, we got things to talk about, so hold on tight as we rocket through The Mandalorian Season 3, Chapter 19, titled The Convert. Before we get into it, if you're a fan of our videos, please like our content and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out and gives us the opportunity to create more content for you. This episode picks back up straight from Chapter 18 on Mandalore after Bo-Katan pulled Din out of the living waters. Bo is sitting staring at the waters, probably in shock about what she just saw, and Din wakes up and says, "I'm redeemed," as he sits up and then collects a water sample to prove he did in fact bathe in the living waters. Bo-Katan then coyly asked Din if he saw anything in the waters, and Din replies that he saw a chasm and didn't realize how deep it was. Bo informs him that it used to not be so deep and the seismic activity from the purge must have opened up a deeper hole in the water. So my theory that Din was pulled down by the mythosaur was definitely wrong, and I believe that the mythosaur we see was lying dormant until the Night of 1,000 Tears woke it up after the bombing of Mandalore. Then Bo asks Din if he saw anything living down there, and Din asks what does she mean, but Bo-Katan doesn't reply. So we know that Bo-Katan was the only one to witness the mythosaur, and she is withholding this knowledge because she thinks that maybe she can use this knowledge to come back and tame the beast, like their ancestors before, which could solidify her claim as leader of Mandalore. Will Bo-Katan end up accomplishing this feat, or will it be Din, or will it be Grogu, who we know has beast control, the special force ability some Jedi have to control creatures, which he used on the Rancor in the Book of Boba Fett. So after this, Bo, Din, Grogu, and R5 leave the planet on the Gauntlet, and throughout this first part, I noted that Bo-Katan didn't remove her helmet, which was out of character for her, knowing that the last time she flew in her ship, she removed her helmet and was shown carrying her helmet all around more often than not in Chapter 17 and 18. Bo-Katan remarks that she would offer Din to eat with her, but she knows that Din would probably not remove his helmet, and Din replies back, "This is the way," and Bo-Katan repeats the mantra too. And curiously, we hear Grogu babble some unrecognizable words, which to me was Grogu trying to say, "This is the way," and I think by the end of this season, Grogu is going to officially speak his first word, which I really hope will be between Din and Grogu as he looks up and calls him Dad. Bo and Din look at each other after hearing Grogu and suddenly are attacked by TIE interceptors. This really does come out of nowhere. They're really close to Kalevala and they rush in the Gauntlet to the planet, and Din jumps out of the ship to retrieve the N1 Naboo starfighter and join the fight. I thought this entire sequence was amazing and beautifully rendered. It's always fun in Star Wars to see our heroes take on some TIE fighters. They both fight off and destroy the fighters, and on their way back to Bo-Katan's castle, they get an alert and we see TIE bombers destroying Bo's home, which in itself is tragic, but also has to remind them of what happened to the planet Mandalore, which was also destroyed by TIE bombers. Bo-Katan proceeds to go after the bombers and manages to destroy one before Din picks up on the radar that there are a ton of fighters coming in, and Din convinces Bo-Katan that they have to retreat. Bo remarks that it's odd for an Imperial warlord to have this amount of fighters. With the precise and coordinated attack that we see, there's no doubt in my mind who these fighters report to. It is most certainly Thrawn, and I believe he'll show up during this season of The Mandalorian. During the time of the Empire, Thrawn was adamant in the idea that the Empire should invest in better TIE fighters, which led to him working on the TIE Defender program. Those special TIEs had both hyperdrives and shields to make them deadly combatants. Thrawn believed it would be easier to control the galaxy with greater numbers of TIE Defenders rather than working on the Death Star, and in the end, the Emperor probably should have listened to him, but we wouldn't have had the story we know and love today if he did. They're definitely dropping some major hints to the possibility that Thrawn will show up. I can imagine them showing Moff Gideon escaping the War Tribunal, and we see him contact the Chiss over holo message. As they flee, Din tells Bo-Katan he knows where they can go, where they won't be found, and they both jump to hyperspace. Then we have a drastic cut after the title sequence to Coruscant, which we get to see in all of its glory, and once again we get to see the galaxy's opera house, which was last seen in Revenge of the Sith. This is where Palpatine told Anakin about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Perhaps there is a connection with Plagueis being developed? We find in the Opera House that Dr. Pershing is speaking to the audience, and we learn that he has gone through the amnesty program, which basically takes ex-Imperials who have reformed and offers them to contribute to the New Republic through work programs and better living conditions. We learn a lot of interesting things in this episode, and during his speech, we learn that Dr. Pershing's work as a scientist focused around cloning and combining different DNA into a single strand cast with the best attributes from all. We also learn that those in the amnesty program are assigned specific code chains. Dr. Pershing is L52, and after returning to housing, he meets up with a table of amnesty officers officers having a drink, and Pershing discovers Amnesty Officer G68, who served as the communication officer on Moff Gideon's cruiser in The Mandalorian. Later on in the episode, we finally learn her name is Elia Kane. So during this episode, Elia Kane befriends Dr. Pershing and encourages him to continue his work to benefit the New Republic. But when Pershing asks his parole officer droid about whether he could continue his work, the droid informs him that cloning research is prohibited in the New Republic. After this, Elia Kane tells Pershing she can help him find the equipment he would need, and after a day he visits Elia and tells her he's in. And during this moment we hear a very ominous theme playing in the background, which is in fact Snoke's theme. You can actually hear it in The Force Awakens. So we can deduce throughout this episode that Dr. Pershing's work has been to create what we eventually know is the Force-sensitive clone vessel named Snoke. Now, from canon during the Return of the Jedi, when the Emperor was falling down the shaft, he used essence transfer to transfer his consciousness into a clone of himself on the Sith planet of Exegol. Now, the clone that Palpatine transferred into wasn't perfect and would rapidly deteriorate with his essence, so he could not leave the planet. So instead, at some point, they designed Snoke to be his stand-in to be the leader of the First Order. So this story is getting developed, and the events we are seeing in The Mandalorian are in fact going to show how they get to cloning Snoke. I believe Snoke will be made up of DNA from Grogu, Luke, possibly the Bad Batch, maybe Omega, and the right combination will finally allow them to create a Force-sensitive clone. So Elia Kane takes Pershing to a shipyard that is dismantling some of the Star Destroyers, and on the way they take a train, where Elia remarks to another passenger, "Tong's Day, am I right?" So for the first time ever in the new canon, we get a reference to the Tong, who were a native species that existed on Coruscant and fought against the humanoids known as the Zell. The Tong were eventually driven off-world and later became the warrior culture now known as the Mandalorians. That's right, the Tong were the original Mandalorians. So it's huge that they were mentioned in this episode. And if you want to learn more about them, please check out my video, The Complete History of the Mandalorians. Tong's Day in the Star Wars universe is a name for one of the days in their week. And this is equivalent to Wednesday, which is in fact the day that the Mandalorian premieres each week. So they go through a fun escape scene on the train and end up jumping off the train into the shipyard. And as they get to the Star Destroyer, Elia finally introduces herself officially to Dr. Pershing, and they make it to the laboratory and begin collecting equipment for his experiments. Here Pershing asks Elia Kane what she wanted to be as a kid when she grew up, and we see Elia move into the darkness, and she says she never got the chance to think about it. This was a very interesting moment, and I believe there's more to Elia Kane's story that will be revealed later. Who could she possibly be? My theory, and it might be wrong, is that Elia Kane is in fact Omega. So hear me out. I keep getting the vibe that she might be a clone, and thinking about it more, what if she is a super spy and ends up revealing that she is working behind the scenes to try and stop everything? And that's why she wipes Pershing's mind at the end with a mind flare so that he can never work on creating Snoke. This is a huge leap, but it is possible. More than likely though, she's just a devoted servant to Moff Gideon. But poor Dr. Pershing gets hooked up to the mind flare, and he tells the Mon Calamari scientist it's a trap, which was a little too on the nose for me, having him repeat Admiral Akbar's famous line, "It's a trap!" After this, we cut back to Din and Bo-Katan, who do land on the planet where the Children of the Watch have made their home. Paz Vizsla comes out and stops both Bo-Katan and Din, but Din tells him that he bathed in the living waters, so Paz begrudgingly lets them pass to see the armorer. In the cave, Din tells the armorer that he is redeemed and gives her the sample he took from the living waters. Bo-Katan tells the armorer she was a witness and pulled Din out of the waters after he fell in. The armorer tests the sample by putting it in her water bath that is used to cool Beskar from forging. We see it shimmer, and I found this to be a great way to show proof. I kept wondering how they would prove it was the living waters, and they came up with a pretty creative way to deal with this plot thread. After this, the armorer declares that Din Djarin is once again a Mandalorian, and she turns to Bo-Katan and tells her that since she bathed in the living waters, by creed, she is also redeemed. Bo tells her that she does not follow the creed, but the armorer asks her if she has removed her helmet since the living waters, and Bo-Katan says that she hasn't, and the armorer tells her she is now a member of the tribe and can stay as long as she wants. All the Mandalorians congratulate Din and Bo, and we see Bo-Katan look at the mythosaur skull in the cave, once again thinking about the mythosaur that she saw earlier. Now, some people think that Bo-Katan is being strategic in trying to become leader of Mandalore, but I really do think that Din Djarin has had an effect on her, and I would like to see her truly follow the way. Bo-Katan has lost a lot in her life, from being a warrior trying to make her father proud, to the Mandalorian people rejecting their own warrior culture, being a part of Death Watch and seeing the group splinter after Maul became leader, to trying to unite all of Mandalore to fight against the Empire, only to see the utter destruction of their planet and her people. Bo-Katan has definitely been through a lot in her life. I feel like bringing her into the tribe and following the way will be a way to have her character think outside of herself and do whatever is best for all of Mandalore. Whether that means she'll rule or that she will support Din, either way I think she is coming to a new place in her life and in what she stands for, which will help reunite the clans and usher in a new age for Mandalore. Whatever the outcome, I love the character development that we're seeing with her, and Katie Sackhoff is doing an incredible job bringing Bo-Katan to life in this show. All in all, I enjoyed a lot of things about this episode, but I felt like we lingered way too long on Dr. Pershing's story. I kept wanting to get back to Din Djarin and Bo-Katan's story, and I felt like we could have condensed what happened into a 15-minute thread in this episode. It felt too long, and I was ultimately disappointed in the storyline that we got, but there were definitely some great elements within that story. It just missed the mark for me. So for my rating, I'm giving this episode a 6 out of 10. It's still definitely worth a watch, and a lot of the elements that we saw in this episode are probably going to pay off down the road. So there you go, there's my breakdown and review for Chapter 19 titled The Convert. So thanks for joining me today on Fatherly Fandom, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. From our families to yours, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.